So in your book, and you have a few of them, but this latest book that you have that just came out, Never Forget Our People Were Always Free, a parable of American healing. You talk a lot about how we are more related than we aren't, right?
Yeah.
So I'm reminding us every day, thanks to Dr. Great Carr, that we Black Africans are the parents of humanity.
Yes.
So I feel like we've had that role of parent snatched from us because of the 400-year interruption called in slavery
Yeah.
and colonization. But parents, need to take their rightful role. You talk about the mothers, you talk about Westmore's mom, your mom. I feel like we're not acting like good parents. We're acting like victims of a system, and the system is what it is. But we can correct this. So this book, you kind of blur the lines of race because everybody's a cousin. You open
Yeah.
up talking about Vice President Dick Cheney's horrible ass having a heart attack or whatever, and reminding us that he's like two or three of y'all's cousins.
Yes. Mine and
Dick
Barack Obama's. Mine and
yes.
Barack Obama.
So
Which
talk about
literally
that
David
conversation you had
Gregory
with Dick
got me.
Gregory.
I mean,
Yes.
I was on set of Meet the Press, and I look at David Gregory, I look like I ain't gonna say anything bad about him today because I just figured out he's my cousin. And he's like, ain't he like every Black person cousin? Because at the time, Dick Cheney was cousins to the first Black president and the president of the NAACP. So like mathematically, it might be possible.
Yo, it's like 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon and 6 degrees of Dick Cheney. We're all Dick Cheney. That something's disturbing about that. But walk through why that was an important, story to put in this. What is the framing?
It's yeah. So the couple things. One, when I figured out that Dick Cheney was my cousin and Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general, was my cousin, the country just felt like really small, and it definitely felt like God had a sense of humor because, there's one person that the head of the NAACP or the former head doesn't want to be related to, it would be Robert E. Lee.
Facts.
But it was also important because, I'll get to the framing of the book in a second. The way I discovered that was that I ultimately figured out that my grandmother's grandfather and his dad, my grandmother's great grandfather, were owned by a man who was the great grandfather's brother and the grandfather's uncle. And the tell was that this man who had many slaves only protected one in his will, and he had several sentences laying out how he should not be treated. And and he would only serve that man's sons, who of course were his nephews. And between that and our DNA and some other documents, the scholar Henry Louis Gates Jr. at Harvard was like, Ben, what's happening in this will is that the owner's dying, and he knows that his manservant, as he referred to, he didn't refer to him as a slave, that his manservant is his brother. And he's simply trying to protect his brother. Well, then I figured out that the owner, and therefore us, because we're all cousins to Robert E. Lee, and that they knew that. So there was an intimacy and a recognition of humanity. Because clearly, if he simply thought him chattel, he would not be trying to protect him.